Hi, finally, guys, this is Grandmaster Alex Yermolinsky. The Tal Memorial is in the books, We were sitting there watching the last round, and now game of the day coverage. Well, in the end, at the finish line, well, I will not keep any suspense going. Although I know some people ask me not to tell the result of the game and in the beginning of my show, but here, well, I think I will. Magnus Carlsen, thanks to the win in the last round, managed to catch up with Levon Aronian, and they both finished with a +2 score, enough for first place. Two-way tie. Now they say the tie breaks go to Carlsen, but as far as I know, well, I know that the players don't care about this, particularly if the money is not involved. I'm sure the money is going to be split between the players. So congratulations to both. They played fantastic tournament. Levon was in trouble today for the first time. The young Ian Nepomniachtchi put on a lot of pressure, sacrificed the exchange, and had long-term pressure. Couldn't get an attack going. Levon exchanged the queens, but in the end game, clear advantage to Nepomniachtchi. But it was hard to break through, and maybe. I'm still not sure, even toward the end. I think White retained winning chances. He just had to play it for another 20 or 30 moves, trying to exhaust the opponent, drive him in time trouble. Nepomniachtchi somehow didn't have the energy, it seemed, to do this. So he allowed Levon to sacrifice the exchange back and reach a drawn rook endgame. Otherwise, they could have still been playing, tremendous finish. Briefly about other games, Karyak and Ivanchuk, obviously both players wanted to make a push, had a chance to tie for first place, but the game was fairly even. I would say toward the end it seemed even that Ivanchuk defended well in early middle game. It seemed like he may have some chances, but it was an illusion, so it's an okay game. Gelfand Anand, the preview of the upcoming World Championship match, did not surprise me. I expect to see a lot of games like this. An early aggression shown in Gelfand's moves, I think it's smoke screen, really. I question, the stamina there. You can't win game right off the starting blocks, obviously, not on this level, not against Anand. And once it fizzled out, they quickly went for a draw. Okay, we'll see. So some 6 months from now, or whenever this match is, and hopefully the Gelfand will come in better shape. Seemed like maybe his physical condition weren't. Conditions weren't, up to par. He will need every ounce of energy he may summon, if he is to stand a chance to beat Anand. Anand, on the other hand, I think he's looking for another exit from chess world. And, I don't know, I wouldn't be surprised, if regardless of the result of the match, Anand would just quit playing for World Championship. That would actually be an okay thing to do. Others can sit there and then they can have a match tournament and sort it out. Carlsen, whatever, Aronian, maybe some others. We'll see, but that's just my opinion. Anyway, maybe I'm too influenced by the way Anand played in this tournament, but I noticed signs of this before, and this really reinforces it. Now, Svidor defeated Kramnik today, and that's we kind of concluded Kramnik's bad tournament. He tried very hard, but as I said before, something's broken in his play, and he had games like this, like he had today before. Kind of just feels like he wants to get it over with, just throws some pieces in and, hopes that this will work. Obviously, Svidor was grateful, to pick up this point, and it came kind of cheap his way. Out of the opening, Kramnik played in absolutely incorrect way, he had no attacking chances. I probably knew it, but I guess it's just frustration and, maybe fatigue. Anyway, good for Svidvar to finish with a decent result. I had concerns for Peter being kind of on a down phase after his great performance in the summer, the 2 tournaments he won. But he held his own, and for Kramnik, well, okay, I said it already. I hope he can come back, but well, it doesn't look very good for Vladimir and long-term prospects. All right, so okay, off to Nakamura-Carlsen. Now we have 2 players moving opposite directions. While Carlsen is steadily making his climb, he gains rating points steadily. He had a sort of a tough period maybe a year ago or a year and a half ago, I don't remember. It seemed like he was sputtering, but right now he regained his footing and he's just slowly climbing up. Is he gonna reach 2900? No, well, I don't think so. Barring, some kind of rating reform, I think it's still a mountain to climb. Well, he's not showing dominance over other players that would warrant, such big rating gap. I mean, there are 2750 guys, and if you're at 2900, then you're supposed to score what, like 70% against them. That's probably impossible to do. It's not Magnus's fault. And I think, he's doing what he set out to do, which is win every tournament he plays. And he is there. He is there with his results. They certainly prove that he has a point. So today, well, and Hikaru is obviously, it just couldn't wait, to get out of Moscow, So he just everything that could go wrong went wrong for him. Maybe except for he probably should have lost that game to Anand yesterday as well. Now, in this situation, well, I mean, I would understand. Anybody would understand if Nakamura just played for a draw, just to make a draw. It's always good not to lose in the last round. Whatever bad tournament you had, well, the last round result is going to be lingering. And seemingly that his opening choice, was Queen C2, so he wants to give it a shot. So where is the C5 line from Magnus? He didn't. He played bishop b4. Now, the thing with Queen c2, the move that wasn't played until recently, is that black now, with the white queen moving off the d file, can play c5. And where is your d5? Well, it's right there. Now, this pawn sacrifice has been played in the recent 3 years or so very often. Very often, white is able to generate some pressure among the people who had good results there. I would mention, I guess, Topalov, Aronian, guys like this. So black takes the pawn on d5, but then he gets under pressure on the d file. And white is able to play knight c3 and then complete his development, put the rook on d1, and the pressure on the d file. Okay, so Naka, give him credit, he was ready to challenge Carlsen in one of the most topical and risky lines. But Magnus is not the kind of guy to enter this. So he goes check. Well, if you play now knight d2, then the game will transpose to a different line, to a knight d2 line. In reply to which, among other moves, black plays bishop b4 and then queen c2. So, well, then I guess it's a maneuvering game because black returns with the bishop there and then plays his bishop to e4. White's problem is that the knight is not super active there on d2. And even if white forces black to exchange the bishop for this knight, the d2 knight, then he doesn't have the control over the e4 square. I had a game like this a long time ago against Sergei Tivyakov with white. And I thought I was playing okay for a while, but I think black always had a good position, and then I overextended and ended up losing the game actually with white. So I know how difficult it is to get anything going there. So now this. Okay, so the bishop is going back, and now white. Well, white could play e4 early. Well, it's actually main line in this position, but of course black answers with d5. Now the resulting position in this takes, king takes, and go forward. Well, this pawn structure could be promising for white, but he needs to get things going on the king side against the black king. So black does have counterplay involving c5, undermining the d4 pawn and going then after the e pawn. I'm not sure that white has an advantage here because the light square bishops haven't disappeared from the board. That robbed white of big chunk of his attacking chances. You really would like to have the bishop on d3 looking at h7. But in this case, no, I know it's playable position, but Hikaru decided not to play it. So he goes more of the standard thing. And now we have a known pawn structure with a little twist. So white has his queen on c2 again instead of pawn on b3. Maybe queen c2 is a more useful move for this kind of Catalan setup. But the problem is that black has pressure coming against c4 very quickly. Well, so with the pawn on b3, c4 is better protected, although it still gets challenged with d5 and sometimes even b5. There is a lot of theory over there with the pawn on b3 here and the queen back on d1. Now, this is a relatively unknown position. And Hikaru here plays knight e5, which is another way of protecting the pawn on c4. But the same way as it happens in the b3 line, black plays the f knight back to d7 to exchange white's active knight. Now, well, if white here decides to transpose to the b3 line, of course he can. Of course he can. He can just take there on d7 and then play b3. But in this situation, well, black knows what to do. Likely he'll castle. And, then after, say, bishop c3 here and knight d2, then black plays for c5. Or sometimes they play for b5. But the important thing is that white gets no benefit from his move order in this case, because he's back to this old theory, which is played many times, and currently it doesn't seem like black's having a whole lot of problems there. Well, okay, so he has an idea. So takes there and puts the bishop out to f4. Now, it is always questionable if this capture d takes c5 is good for white in the Catalan. Well, when your bishop is on d3 and you play sort of a queen's gambit positions, then your pawn on e5 provides white with sufficient space to make an attack possible against the black king, because the black knight's driven away from f6. But for the purposes of playing in the center or the queen side, that's where the bishop now is positioned for. That's very questionable if it's good, to have the pawn on e5. White needs to hit d5. He can't really go around it, well, because he has no play. He needs to play rook d1, knight c3, e4, but it's questionable if he can get it. Now, also the c file is open, and it's likely that black is going to be able to put the rook there. In many of those positions, the move e4 could be answered with d4. Now, for now, white needs to move the rook away. Now the bishop back. Well, I guess Hikaru here figured he needs development. He could have played this, but guess black can even play d4 here. Well, the d4 pawn looks weak, but white can attack it by playing the bishop to e3. But black has two pieces coming out to support it: knight c6 and bishop c5. In the meantime, the e5 pawn would always also get under attack, one way or another. So I guess that's the key thing about this position. So Hikaru decided to develop his knight. And now came here and with the knight to f3, I guess, thinking that e4 will be played later. But came g5. Well, modern players, they're not averse to moves like this if they see the, concrete immediate benefit from this move. And some people play these moves. Some people like Morozevich, Shirov, or Shabalov, they can play this move just even if there is no benefit to it, just because they can play like that. Well, Carlsen simply spotted, that he can win the pawn on e5. And that's a good enough reason for him to play g5. Once again, white's pieces are nowhere near in a position to exploit this weakness of the black king. So Nakamura's idea of protecting the e5 pawn first and then playing e4, it gets rudely interrupted by this. And now white's already down a pawn. In order to find compensation, once again, white needs to push e4. So he plays his bishop out there and goes forward. Well, the problem is rather that this move, I think that's an important move played here, because white could get things going only if he got to take on d5 and then put his knight to f5. So bishop c5, although it's a strong bishop, of course, defensively, bishop c5 move is designed to eliminate this knight when needed. And also there is another important move possible for black, which is queen f6. So attack the bishop on h4 and send it back. Possibly even some x-rays against f2. Well, knight b3. Well, I don't know really if there was a better move here. Maybe knight b3 is alright. But even if you get this bishop, like I said, black gets good development, so the rook comes out. And Magnus's moves are always very simple. It's the sign of a truly strong player. He doesn't have to do anything special. He plays the moves we can all understand, but in his games it all works out. In games of other people, it's not enough. So, that's my explanation. Now rook takes. Well, Hikaru tried to mix it, this queen a4 move is alright, so it's ironed that rook on a8 tactically and maybe pawn on a7, but at the moment he cannot take anything. Obviously the queen will be trapped, if you go over there. So it's not an option. So we came to the center. Well, now the knight can't move, but comes this one. Well, d takes a4, and I don't know. It seemed like all the moves are logical. It's just white's not getting anything out of this but a worse endgame. Now, it's the worst possible scenario for Hikaru. He lost the pawn, his king is boxed in, and there's still rooks on the board. Magnus is very happy because he's playing for a win without any risk. Well, say total disaster for Hikaru in this game. Now, rook d5. I guess he's taken advantage of this mating ideas on d1, so there is no way white could do this on account of rook d8. And also Magnus spots this important possibility of making a passed pawn. Well, the pawn has to clear two squares, d4 and d2. On both of the squares, white may try to blockade, but he's lacking the important square for his rook on d1. So I guess the pawn would go further. So, and the most annoying for white is the position of the king. So you can't think of any counterplay or even a defensive formation with this king is like this. So there isn't much to do but to play this way. Now with the move bishop e2, now this is important. With this move, black makes sure that the white king cannot leave this cage without white first moving his f pawn, which would be another pawn sacrifice. Well, it's absolutely the key move, because if it didn't play it, then white could move the bishop somewhere and then come out with the king. If the king comes to d2, then white would have this blockade that would likely lead to a draw. Well, for my every Russian schoolboy knows, I'm planning a series of videos on opposite color bishops now, since I'm done with the same color bishops, and that would be a good addition to it, but we'll see. Anyway, so bishop e2, that's a great move, and now Hikaru has to get his king in. Now, how do people hold these positions with opposite color bishops? No, well, they blockade. The answer is simple. What black needs to do is to infiltrate with his king. Now, the first direction he's taken is to try to come to h3. Hikaru stopped it by playing his pawn over there. But when you put your pawns, when you're in a defensive, and you put your pawns on the square opposite to the color of your bishop, it's very difficult to hold them there, because the opponent's bishop can attack and make the move. So h3 is sort of a stopgap, solution here. Well, it is not clear to me if white could make a draw by playing his pawn to h4. But to me, it still seems like a more natural plan here. Now, white has to keep the king on e3, because when the king comes to g4, then you must come back to f2. Or at least, do it on the next move. You can't allow the black king to reach g2. So now, where is the breakthrough? No, well, there is the other side of the board. So in this situation, I would expect black to start. No, maybe he can play h5 first. It's not going to hurt him, and then start moving his king over there. Well, one technical problem that black needs to overcome is that his bishop is not well positioned now, because he needs to come around and attack the a2 pawn and force the move a3, so the black king can try to infiltrate this way. But it's difficult to do because we always in danger of losing one of the pawns. So I think from just practical point of view, this is what the Hikaru had to do. Well, one more thing. When you try to hold your defenses in opposite color bishop positions, it's important to keep the front narrow, because your king and your bishop, they're going to have multiple jobs. And in cases when there is a large, wider split between his passed pawns and your weaknesses on both sides of the board, then it becomes impossible. Here, maybe there is a better chance, although I'm still thinking that the king will come here, and then black will probably probably advance his a pawn to a4. See, if he could bring the king to b3, then he would threaten to go to c2. And that would put white in Zugzwang. Okay, let me play this moves on the board. This is a bad mistake here. Suppose this happens, and he waits, and then comes this. And there is no king d2 on account of f2. So the king reaches c2. Once the king reaches c2, then the game, of course, is over. Simply because after this, black is threatening to play f2 followed by d2. Okay, that would be easy, but the question is how to force the white pawn move from a2 without losing any of your pawns in the process. That is not entirely clear to me. I was actually watching this video on the official website, a press conference or post-mortem, whatever they call it. Magnus was there and he was talking about the game. And it seemed like he hesitated a little bit when he was asked about this position. He kept saying things like, oh, that should be winning, should be winning. But, no, well, should be winning and winning is two different things. There is really no, well, black's ahead by 1.7 evaluation in this position. I was watching you guys, kibitzing, and I was kibitzing too on game board when this game was still in progress, and I'm still trying to reinforce this point. This end games, they should be looked through the end, all the way through the end. That's the difficulty, because there is no 1.7. It's either a win or a draw. It's not some kind of random, middle game position, or even the end game position, but with rooks and knights on the board, kind of more pieces with more tactical ability, when indeed, we just go by those evaluations. Here, no, we need to look through it to the very end. What I'm thinking as a plan here, so you wait. I think I'm gonna move the pawns. So come here and then waits over there and move the pawn to a4 and b5. Well, bishop d4 was a mistake. Of course, there was a2. So he has to sit back there. So first this comes. Now, well, actually in this position, black can move the bishop out. That's an important moment, because in reply to bishop c3, I think I have a very annoying move a3. This could be the key. So since, because of the shaky position of the bishop, white cannot take the pawn on f3. And if he doesn't play bishop c3, if he sits back there defending, then I guess there is this. Now the threat becomes d2. That's a strong threat. And then queening with the f2 pawn. See, I needed to move the bishop away from a2 to regain the mobility of the pawns. And in this case, I think black just accomplished that, because the only way to defend against d2 would be bishop c3, and then once again this comes in. Great effect. So yeah, I would expect black to win this game, but of course a complete analysis is required to reach the final verdict on this. But as I said, I was impressed with Magnus. He was Magnus during his post-mortem. He was very composed, and said all the reasonable things. I think his knowledge of this kind of endgame, is quite up to par, with the best in the world. All right, so let's return back to h3. Um, h5, and now bishop f1. So what's going to happen is black is going to exchange one of his passed pawns for the h pawn. On the face of it, it's an accomplishment for white. But in fact, there are new inroads open into white's position. And he can't prevent black from getting another passed pawn. So Hikaru waited, which is reasonable because he wanted to get the more remote pawn. Well, like I said, that's wider gap between the pawns, more difficult to defend. And here he comes back and takes this defensive position. Well, the problem is that he can't stop the back f pawn from going to f4 and being exchanged for the g pawn. And this is how black would get 2 pawns. When I saw this position, I immediately recalled this old, relatively old endgame from Kramnik-Swidler game, where actually, I'll probably show it in one of my Russian schoolboy knows videos, but the thing is, that's exactly, black is reaching exactly the formation that Kramnik was looking for, and that's why Swidler resigned the game. As it turned out, Swidler resigned prematurely because he did have a draw, but that draw could only be reached when the black pawn was still on f5. With colors reversed, it was c4, with particular position of the kings. But in this situation, the front f pawn is already far down the board, and there is nothing to stop Magnus from executing his plan. So he goes over there. Now, f5. Here is the thing, f4 is going to happen anyhow. If then you take, okay, well, before this controversial move b3, if you play this, well, then forward. And if bishop takes, then, well, it's even worse because now black is simply going to queen. I guess the pawn goes through to h3. Well, taking with the pawn is the same thing because the advance of the h-pawn would force white actually to play f5 and give up his f-pawn for nothing. So black is getting to his desired position. There is another idea here, of course. You can even try to put the bishop on f5. And it's typical for opposite cover bishops, and then queen your pawn for free. But I guess white can still play f5, so it's not going to change anything. Returning to the game, the move b3, there are a lot of people analyzing with computers and all screamed, oh, this is a terrible decisive mistake, he made his pawns weak. And also, but I gotta tell you one thing, guys. When you rely on the computer evaluations and endgames like this, it's fine. But just don't draw any conclusions about positional play based on what the computer tells you. That is really, it has nothing to do with anything. Now, the purpose of the move b3 was that Hikaru tried to create a barrier, some kind of a block on the opponent's king path to the queen side. Now, it's not going to work, and indeed there are many reasons why it doesn't work. But at least, this is an attempt. And what happens after the move a3? Okay, you'll see it later in the game. It would not have changed anything. Now, or maybe I'll just play it out. I'll just play it out like this. Now you do your f5, you're going to have to do this. And then now there is something that Magnus later did in the game, moving the bishop to g4. That's very useful, because that way if yeah, okay, so that way the f3 pawn is protected, and if needed, For example, in this position, if black plays a5 and then comes something like this, then black can even play bishop g4, because the bishop is always taboo. So the white bishop cannot stop two pawns. So that way the king side is secured, and the next order of business is to simply put white in Zugzwang. That's exactly what happened in this position. Look, what can you do? If you move your bishop if you move your bishop out on this diagonal, you lose the pawn on b2. If you move your king to f2, then black will sacrifice one of the pawns on the king side and get the queen side pawn. And now he has enough large, split 3 files between the passed pawns, and he's just simply going to win your bishop for the b pawn. Yet, in this situation, white could probably play bishop g7, just simply taking advantage of the fact that in this situation, black can't push his pawns forward yet. No, so it would require a little bit more work there. But in fact, the work is done in one move. Now, suddenly the black king returns and it takes the e2 square. So you can no longer play king f2 because then h2 queens. And if not, and you must return to e5, then it comes here, and oh well, here you go, h2 followed by f2, or the other way around, doesn't matter. So this is how those endgames are lost or won, if you wish. And no, it's pretty automatic, I'm sure Hikaru saw through this. Alright, so they played these moves. And now everybody was screaming for bishop takes b3. No, well, yeah, well, I guess it wins. It should win the game. Well, simply because white is tied up with the bishop to the a pawn and with the king to the king side. So you reach this position. But then black, of course, is threatening to play a3. But white will play this move. And now in order to win the game, black needs to bring the king over. Now, well, it's a win. King over to the queen side. It's a win, but it has to be timed accurately. Well, if the pawn was already on a2, then it's very easy because there is no way, white can take any pawns. But with the pawn needing to cross the a3 square first, there is some kind of a possibility that in this situation, say if it was black's turn to move and he went king d3, then white in reply actually can take the pawn on f3. So, well, it's absolutely not needed for a human player, to bother with this kind of stuff. Although I understand that computers show that this is a quicker win. A quicker doesn't necessarily mean better. Well, what Magnus did, and I'm sure that every good player would have done the same, is just to simply return to his main plan, which is to force the white pawns on the queen side on a dark square, so the black king then would have a path, infiltrating. And that's really, that's the end for Hikaru. So they reached this, and then they went over there, it's coming back to h5, exactly as I said. And now Hikaru resigned the game. Well, those people who thought, it's some kind of whatever, his cell phone ring, or whatever, he went to get orange juice and lost on time. This is not the case. White is absolutely totally lost here. And as a matter of fact, I think that white is lost in this position, maybe lost, even if black didn't have the pawn on a6. No, and as is, there is really no contest. One more comment, before we depart here. Look at the fate of this pawn on a3. This is the kind of pawn you cannot defend with your bishop in opposite cover bishop endings. So the pawn's going to be lost for sure. Let me just play how it could defend it. Just play a few moves. Yeah. Yeah, let's play the solid move. It always helps. And now, that's the final zugzwang. That's the final zugzwang, and well, I mean, I don't blame Hikaru for not letting us see this on the board. He had enough pain, coming his way in the tournament. And well, with that, I'm going to conclude my coverage. Once again, congratulations go to both Levon Aronian and Magnus Carlsen. They once again confirmed that maybe they're in a class of their own. They're the only 2,800 players that really play like it. Kramnik dropped out of there, and Anand, well, it's only a matter of time. I don't know if he dropped out or not, but well, anyway, so these two guys, well, anyway, looking ahead, I don't want to say that the Gelfand Anand match is some kind of a, afterthought. Of course, it's important. It's a world championship match, but I guess, maybe that's the last match when the players of the old generation, the post-Kasparov generation, would slug it out for the title. I think, well, we're gonna see some new players, and hopefully, Nepomniachtchi can keep up, with his ascent. Hopefully, Karyakin can work his way out of that funk, he's been in. And Nakamura is even more serious case, but there is Giri. Well, book is not closed on Fabiana Caruana and Vashir Lagraf. There are a lot of exciting new players, and we'll be watching them play, and hopefully we'll see more good games here on the Internet Chess Club. Thank you for your attention. This is Grandmaster Alex Yermolinsky. Hi there, chess fans. This is Grandmaster Alex Yermolinsky, here again with today's new in chess trivia question, where during our Game of the Day coverages from the Tal Memorial in Moscow, you can win a 1-year subscription to the award-winning Dutch magazine New in Chess. All you have to do is listen carefully to today's question and send your answers by email to trivia@chessclub.com. Please remember to also include your full name, ICC username, and postal address. And here is the New in Chess Trivia main prize question. What incident was the reason for Mikhail Tal missing the first 4 rounds of the 1966 Havana Olympiad? And when he did return to the tournament hall to play, it was with his head heavily bandaged.